State Representative El-Mahdi Holly here, and thank you for joining us for this opportunity to talk about our maps. Now, you may be kind of wondering, why is it that children can understand the value of being able to play on a kindergarten area, but somehow when you become adults, they learn less about how to play together and have to find ways to either exact revenge or sometimes make it so that the playing field is unfair. And, for that, we have to look at our tax dollars, how to better manage that, and making sure that we understand why in the circles of power, some would like to have the advantage over others. What is gained by that? And to know, too, are we constitutionally protected in case that there ever is a situation whereby our district maps are going to be recut? And what is what is really gained by that advantage? That's not something that oftentimes people discuss, but it's why I'm glad that you at least checked in, and so that we can have a very needed conversation about why we're going back into session on November 29th. For that, I've been able to get the help of a dear friend who I believe is going to be able to help us kind of talk about this, and that is Aunna Dennis, who is with the Common Cause Georgia, and she'll kind of explain what she does there. Just 1 second. I'm going to thank you for your patience on this. All right. All right, here we go. All right. But yeah, it's the reason why in Georgia, after many years through which our state has post-Civil War expanded voting rights to be able to include the participation of women, as well as making sure that we have a fair playing field, or at least a fair atmosphere for persons who are themselves minority, to be able to make sure that there's an opportunity for their voice to be heard, and so that they can elect people into the position that they choose. Is why the civil rights movement was really strong, certainly throughout the last century, certainly during the last half of that, where we were able, at least our ancestors were able, to make a very strong effort and be able to have the passage of not only the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but also the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That Voting Rights Act contains with it several provisions to make sure that, especially in states that had previously marginalized those populations from being able to fairly participate, that they would do so in a manner that would respect the constitutional rights of the citizens. It would make sure that the formula that is used to determine who is a eligible voter, that would be it would be the same across the board, and that it would eliminate any cultural biases. And what we have found is that through the Section 2 and Section 5, that one, which would allow for a federal judge to pre-clear a state which has had multiple times in the past where it's been found that that state has violated persons' constitutional rights with respect to their being able to vote because it was based upon a specific race, or sometimes it can be, there's many other factors that have to do with the personal demographics of that voter, but also it's about how do you apply that formula, and so that is what speaks to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. What we'll do as well, because this is a much longer conversation, this is not just about how districts are going to be shaped within the space of a couple of months when we go back into session. No, these districts once they are approved by the federal district court judge, they will be in place for the next 10 years. And because I know if you're watching this, if you're looking at your own districts and you're thinking in Henry County area as well as Clayton County, many of the urban districts have seen a huge population influx. More people have been moving in to those areas than outside in the rural areas. And so that's why when you look at a map and you'll look at all of the 159 counties of Georgia, and you're looking at these broad swaths of land that are just completely red, understand that a lot of those areas don't have cities scattered throughout. The city, which controls that one big, huge swath of land that is just one county, that city may be tiny, and all it takes is for the voters to vote in high numbers to be able to turn out. And if that party, whether if it's a Republican Party and they're able to take it, they take that one town or two towns, they take that entire area. So, and I say that because I want you to understand that it's when you look at people say, well, Georgia's a red state. It's a red. It's really not. It's so not. It's more of a purple state now. I think the Atlanta Region Commission oftentimes looks at the numbers of residents who are moving closer to the cities. And what they found is that for a state like ours, around 6.4 million Georgians actually live in and around metro Atlanta, metropolitan Atlanta, or metropolitan areas of our state. And for how many live in the rural areas? It's around 4.3 million. So again, that changes the way that people think. When you look at these big areas, you're saying, okay, well, you see, it's a red state. No. That means that entire county has been won by a red, a Republican majority, but it doesn't mean that they're scattered throughout the state. It means that it just that county seat or several of those cities that are in that area, they won for that party. But when you look throughout the state, this is a battleground area. And because Georgia is now a battleground state, then that now increases the likelihood that those who are in power and seeing that power threatened, they're going to probably make concerted efforts to try to protect their districts. The problem, however, again, means that if we're looking at those sections of the Voting Rights Act, and if court cases, particularly one, Shelby versus Holder, where it guts a provision whereby you have to make sure that you are not using race as the sole factor. It can be something that you can consider, but when it becomes a factor upon which you rely to select certain voters over other voters, well, then you now run the risk of creating maps that are very much look like the types of maps where those who are those who are benefiting from there being a white majority, they're going to be the ones who those maps now run the risk of looking like something from the past. We don't want that. So we will be going back into session November 29th, and Judge Jones, who sat and presided over this matter, has made it clear that Georgia has to be able to submit resolutions for those maps, and those maps have to look just as proper as the federal government will allow. Since Georgia, in times past, has made multiple errors that have been against voters of color. So we are in a position now where we have to get it right. If we don't get it right, then it is also very likely that the courts have means by which they use to ensure that there's fair maps. One of them being that they can task the job of cutting that district to what's called a special master. And that special master can have the final say. And again, this not just affects how we vote from the first year or second year. This will sit with us for another 10 years. That's why it's important to get it right the first time. And so I'm actually, I see, yeah, so Miss Dennis, who I was going to have on, she actually has to go pick up her daughter. And but she has agreed to, I'm gonna have to follow back up with her. You know, family time is important. And, but what I will do is online, I'm going to be able to post for you the decision. One of the reasons why we are so supportive of organizations on the ground, I know I'm particularly, and I know my colleagues have been, for those civic organizations, is because oftentimes civic organizations, if they find that their members are adversely affected, meaning that there's a bad impact of a law, then they can wage their own fight in the court system to be able to make sure that at least some eyes from a judge who is, you know, either duly appointed or duly elected can make sure that these laws are fair. So Alpha Phi Alpha, our nation's first fraternal organization that was initiated by African Americans back in 1906, took it upon themselves to submit their own filing of their lawsuit into federal court, and they prevailed. And so that's why we're in this situation now. Oftentimes, if we can't pass legislation, if the laws don't pass, or if the laws do pass, there's always the option of getting a person who was either a federal court judge or even a superior court judge, just depends upon the matter, for them to be able to get some eyes on that situation and for them to be able to look at the law as it is written and to look at precedent or those actions that were already implemented and be able to look and ask, what will the judge's finding be with respect to those actions? And so they look at court precedents, and many times they may refer back to the rationale of the court when they made that decision, depending upon the law that they are attempting to apply at that moment. So when we look at this particular case, we see that there are broad swaths of districts that are particularly located in the South metropolitan area of our region, our Atlanta region, as well as even down in the Macon area. And because these districts have seen a huge influx of minority, mainly African-American voters moving into those areas, what this lawsuit has found is that those districts, which were created back in 2020, when we saw the election laws, Senate Bill 202, when it passed, actually 2020, it wasn't 2020, it's 2021. When 2021, when those redistricting maps were created, because there was a huge influx of minority voters there, mainly African Americans, they were packed into districts. And I think that's where I've come, mine area is. So if you remember, when I took office and it had District 111, I had unincorporated Stockbridge, I had unincorporated McDonough, I had unincorporated Hampton. Actually, I had downtown McDonough, like literally had the square was in my district. And I also had portions of McDonough that were further west, almost touching the tip of Lake Dow. And I had Locust Grove. I had a huge expanse of Locust Grove in my district, even where it touched down into Jenkinsburg, right on the border. And I had a little piece of Jonesboro out to the out to the west, over by unincorporated Hampton. And so it was a large area, previously held by State Representative Jeff Cauble and State Representative Brian Strickland, who is now the senator. And that area seemingly got chopped and almost in half. Locust Grove was completely taken out of the district. My boundary lines changed with respect to McDonough. And now my district goes over into Lovejoy. And it did see a huge influx of African Americans who are moving into the area. But oftentimes, the court, when it has looked at the application of the Voting Rights Act to make sure that districts are fairly cut, the court has oftentimes reviewed those bad actors, those states that got it wrong, and looked at the concept of packing. And you pack a district, then what you're really doing is you're not allowing for all voters to be able to elect someone into power that will best represent them. Instead, you're confining those voters. And that's why we're going to be looking at ways in which a good number of new districts will be created so that voters are not sandwiched together. It allows for boundaries within those districts to be those boundaries have to have characteristics that are shared, and so it has to be made fair. So that's the general overview. I will also have a very strong and I think fruitful discussion with the executive director of Common Cause, as well as our friends over at American Civil Liberties Union, and that's why, and the reason why I'm bringing them on too is just so that you don't always just kind of hear it coming from a politician. Okay, yes, we're supposed to know what these laws are. We're supposed to bring you an update about how this will impact you. But the good news is that there are not-for-profit organizations. They don't exist to get any money, but their focus is on making sure that the law is properly followed, as well as making sure that anyone who is elected into office, mainly those who are at the state level and at the federal level, that they are working on the behalf of citizens and are not working, making sure that those elected officials are not working for their own financial benefit or being in office for longer than they should be, and making sure that those elected officials file their financial disclosures and their watchdog groups, but not just watchdog groups to say they call themselves watchdog groups. No, they actually publish reports. They publish those reports, and they have to themselves, they're being held to the standards by those in the industry. So thank you for watching thus far. We're going to continue this conversation when my counterparts who are, again, over at the American Civil Liberties Union, as well as Common Cause Georgia, and a few others will be online to be able to answer any questions. But what I'm going to do, you're going to find at the end of this very short video, I'm going to have a place for you to please list some questions that you have. I've always been very big about making sure that you understand what goes on. I've tried to be accessible and approachable, but I want to make sure that we have a real conversation about what this means for your area, for what this means for even the local precincts where you regularly vote. And I understand as well that a lot of this is tough for you to hear at once, because so often, let's be honest about it. I mean, if you're around my age, if you're over 45, probably the last time that you've had a very serious understanding about politics and social studies was when you were a kid in school. I mean, it's when you probably remember Schoolhouse Rocks. I mean, that's how long ago it is. Imagine that's how long ago it's been. You wait 20, 30 years, 40 years, and then you're thrust into the world, and money leaves out of your paycheck, and it goes to support a system that you haven't touched in terms of your knowledge and and understanding where your money goes, you haven't touched it since you were out here playing on Jungle Gym. You know, that's crazy. But it's not your fault. This is the way the system is set up. But we can have the type of dialogue, facilitate the conversations that get us better aware. I do believe that we were a better informed voter. You are more keenly acute in focusing on where your money has been, and it gets you a true sense that you own this world, that you own your life. Because if laws are made, laws are passed, and you are only clued in to what you see on TV news, not only are you an uninformed voter, but you risk being someone who is paid into the system but doesn't quite know what's going on. Oh, 1 second. I think we have someone on the phone. Let's see. Let me go look. Hey, Aunna, you there? I think it's got you on mute. Okay, cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So Aunna Dennis, who you heard from me, she is a dutiful mom. She's about to pick up her little girl, and so I don't want to. She's just gonna briefly. I spoke a little bit about Section 2 and Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. If you might be able to, and I'm gonna post those links there for people to go and take a look at it themselves. Why are those sections so important with respect to our drawing of these maps?
Yes. Hi, everybody. So the sections are important because it kind of tells us how we can have guidelines to the mapping process. So how we can have guidelines to the empowerment process of how your district lines are drawn. Right now, for the last decade, we have lost pre-clearance under the Voting Rights Act. So Section 5 was gutted. And then what we've seen is these states have used that as a tool to weaponize drawing unfair districts, packing communities, not thinking about what's a part of the interest of the community, of how they want to be congealed together, or who they actually interact with as their neighbors. So we have a lot of things happening in the sandbox, since we're all by the parks. We have a lot of things going on in the sandbox, and we see that it's just politics as usual, that everyday folks, it doesn't matter what you want for your resources that are being drawn by how lines are happening. It doesn't matter where precincts are supposed to be mapped that says you can have fair, equitable access to balloting options. So these are some of the hurdles that we have. But soon we'll be in a special legislative session where our maps will be actually redrawn by our state legislature, which is a big deal for Georgia because we got unfair maps. And a judge said, you know what? Those maps aren't fair. They're definitely packing Black folks in districts. They're definitely cracking them. So they're trying to definitely unjustly disrupt power of minority communities. So now it's up to our legislature to get it right. And it's up to you all to make sure that they're held accountable to get it right.
It is. Thank you for explaining that. The last thing, and because you really got to go, I gave to them, talked to them briefly that if we don't get it right, if the legislature does not create maps that are less racist and are where they take into account, you can take into account race, but that's not just the only factor. You have to look at what other factors might you have to kind of take into consideration when drawing that map.
Yeah, you have to take in consideration, like, are there communities that have language language access? So is there communities that are congealed together that have a certain amount of population, a high population, where you have to provide equitable access to in language options? In Georgia, we have jurisdictions that are actually covered under those mandates by the VRA, so the Voting Rights Act, that says that you have to give these communities access to balloting options that are actually in their language. So in Georgia, we are covered under Section 203 in Gwinnett County. In other states, you have states that are fully covered under Section 203, like Florida. You have states like Minnesota that has certain counties that are covered under Section 203, where they have to give in language for their Amharic community. So for their
Ethiopia.
Somalian and Ethiopian communities, they have to do in language ballots. So we have that actually happening in multitude of states. We also have in the VRA that communities that have disabilities are actually covered, where we have to have at least one tabulation unit in a precinct so folks with disabilities can be able to actually use an electronic unit. So we're not just trying to make people use just only paper ballots. So those are some of the things that we have to look at when we're thinking about how we draw equitable lines. We also have to think about where are communities situated? Are there land masses around communities so there's Lake Spivey. We have to think about where is that located and where are the populations around that, and then how does that split up communities as well?
Very good. Thank you. And the last thing, because I am not holding you up, okay? That little precious sister, darling needs to get picked up. What is it for your work at Common Cause? I did my best to summarize that. What might you be able to say for Common Cause, and what others may do, or how best should they reach out if they want to learn more about Common Cause Georgia?
Yeah, so you can follow us on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, Common Cause Georgia, at Common Cause GA. You can always come to the Capitol with us. We will definitely be watching special legislative sessions. So we will be under the Gold Dome on November 29th, watching to see how our community is going to be taken into account. Are they going to allow us to have meaningful public comment? Or are they going to just move things across the chambers and do business as usual and throw sand at each other, as we know? So definitely join into that. We actually do a lot of transparency watching around accountability on democracy issues. So if you want to be a part of that watchdogging process of how does our government and democracy work for us? How is Georgia doing on getting the lines right? How are we being activated on being a part of balloting processes when it comes to election protection, and if we have fairness at our precincts? Be a part of the mix. And there's so many ways that folks can be a part of the mix, and it's more about meeting people where they are. So come and join us and meet us where we are. We'll meet you where you are, and hopefully we'll see you on November 29th under the Gold Dome as we're watching this special legislative session.
Thank you. All right, y'all. Y'all got it from Aunna Dennis. When you see her, give that sister a round of applause, okay? Because not only is she providing us the information, but she's actually holding it up for your little girl. How old is she?
She's 4.
She's 4, okay? So let's go and let's encourage mommy to be united with her daughter. And thank you. And yes, we'll be down there. But thank you for this talk. Everyone, I'm going to put a link up there for you all to find more information. But thank you for staying tuned. This conversation will continue. All right. Thanks, Aunna.
I think so. Bye.